In casual conversation, I often hear people say that this is a Christian nation, to which I firmly and emphatically say, no, it is not, and it never has been. Very few people will challenge me on that point, but most of the time the response I hear is, well, we were founded on Judeo-Christian principles. To this response, I was usually silent out of ignorance, because I believed that this was true. And it's not surprising that I believe this was true, because we hear it from pastors, from the media, even from our government officials.
America was not founded as a Muslim nation.
So why do you think America is a Christian nation?
America was not founded as a Hindu nation.
The political philosophy of the founders necessitated a divine foundation.
I believe our founding fathers were informed by Judeo-Christian values.
Go back to what our founders and our founding documents meant. They're quite clear that we would create law based on the God of the Bible and the Ten Commandments. It's pretty simple.
While they understood the value of a secular government, they feared a secular society.
What they thought was right and wrong came from the Ten Commandments, which is Judeo-Christian philosophy. That is beyond a reasonable doubt.
America was founded as a Christian nation.
But despite this idea being so pervasive, the United States being founded on Judeo-Christian principles is a myth.
No, you see, that's just a myth.
Yeah, but she's my myth.
No, myth.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Kermit's right. But Christian nationalists are not satisfied with merely allowing this myth to be pervasive. They are using it to promote their own agenda, which includes rewriting history, passing legislation in favor of Christianity over other religions. That's why I'm going to be doing a series of videos to debunk the myth that the United States was based on Judeo-Christian values. If you're interested in this, let's have a chat. There you are. It's good to see you again, and thank you for joining me. In the comments below, please tell me about your own experiences with people who have told you that we live in a Christian nation or that our nation was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. I'd love to hear your experiences. This is going to be a video series, so I will probably feature some of your comments in future videos as well. If you enjoy this content, please hit the like button and subscribe, and consider becoming a Patreon of mine. I'm looking to get some new equipment, maybe a ring light to take some of the glare off from behind me, and a teleprompter so I can stop looking at my computer all the time while I'm filming. So if you'd be interested in supporting me so I can get some new equipment, please look at my Patreon page. Okay, today's video, we are focusing on Christian nationalists, and my primary source of information for this video is The Founding Myth by Andrew Seidel. Andrew Seidel is a constitutional attorney with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Christian nationalists are dangerous to our society, first because they are historical revisionists. They want to perpetuate the idea that secular America is a myth and that government should favor religion, and particularly the Christian religion. In February 2016, they initiated Project Blitz. The purpose of Project Blitz was to introduce legislation that seeks to alter our history, our ideals, and our national identity. Category 1 bills that they would legislate would allow such religious displays as In God We Trust, or the Mayflower Compact, or George Washington's Farewell Address, or famously, the Ten Commandments, like what Judge James Taylor of Hawkins County, Tennessee displayed in his courtroom. Here they are, the 10, 9, 11, how many commandments? There's actually 9 of them listed here, but as you see, the 9th one is actually labeled as number 11. And the one that he missed was adultery. Interestingly enough, this denizen of religious morality was sued by a former staffer for $3 million for sexual harassment and retaliation. He pocketed some of the money that was donated for this Ten Commandments display. All in all, he pled guilty to several felonies, was ordered to pay over $71,000 in restitution, got 4 years in prison, 600 hours of community service, and was disbarred. How's that for those who tell us that by taking the Ten Commandments out of schools, that's what's causing children to misbehave? Christian nationalists also want to codify Category 2 bills, which would directly promote Christianity. Bills doing things like creating the Year of the Bible, or Christian Heritage Week, or stressing the importance of the Bible in history. It's when we get to the Category 3 bills that we really start running into problems. These would legally disfavor the non-religious and minority communities, especially the LGBTQ community. Bills that would allow discrimination in business practices and the placing of children by groups that are also religious organizations. One form of this revisionism came when Michelle Bachmann, former congresswoman from Minnesota, invited David Barton to come and speak to the 2010 Congress and teach a class to Congress on the Christian history of the Constitution. Major problem with this is David Barton is a blatant historical revisionist. He wrote a biography of Jefferson that was so full of lies that the publisher finally pulled it from the shelves. And lest you think that I'm exaggerating, here's Barton himself.
If you try to interpret the Constitution away from those biblical values, it will never work. And that's where we are today. We're trying to make it a secular document. And that's like trying to breathe on the moon. It doesn't work. The atmosphere is not the same. You have to have the atmosphere here. And the atmosphere of the Constitution were those biblical principles. And anytime you separate those and try to operate it without it, or you try to put people in office who have no biblical understanding, it's just not going to work the same. It's like trying to use a screwdriver for a sponge or a shovel for a hammer. It's just not going to work. That's not the way it was made. One of the things I love to do with even groups of pastors is I will pull out a bunch of constitutional clauses and stick it up in front of pastors and say, what do you see? Constitution. No, they're all Bible verses. There are so many Bible verses quoted in the Constitution, cited in the Constitution, but today we don't even recognize that because we don't think about looking at the Constitution as something that has religious tones to it because, again, we're told it's a godless Constitution, you know, and we buy into that. So it's fun for me to show pastors, no, look at this verse out of Deuteronomy 7:15. Now read it's the same language.
The quotation that he attributes to James Madison comes from his own book, Myth of Separation. His sources that he cites are secondary sources, and historians who tried to verify it could not find this quotation not only in any of Madison's original papers, but even in the secondary sources that Barton has quoted. And the Bible verse that Barton mentioned in this film clip, Deuteronomy 7:15, reads, "The Lord will keep you free from every disease. He will not inflict on you the horrible diseases you knew in Egypt, but he will inflict them on all who hate you." Okay, Mr. Bart, you find that for me in the Constitution. Is it in the judicial powers? Maybe it's in the section on no religious test. Interestingly enough, all the key words in this Bible verse, Lord, disease, inflict, Egypt, hate, not a single one of these words appears anywhere in the Constitution. So please tell me how you found this Bible verse in the Constitution. The words Jesus and the Bible and Bible verses do not appear anywhere in the Constitution, and this was intentional by the framers of the Constitution. Senator Rick Santorum was embarrassed by a Christian nationalist when he was introduced by a pastor who yelled, "Get out," at all non-Christians, because this is a Christian nation. Senator Santorum was forced to distance himself from this introduction. The ideas of Christian nationalism are not limited to politicians. Bill O'Reilly, the disgraced news host of Fox News, felt that children should be taught Christian nationalism in school because he felt that it was the basis of our laws. Pew Research found that 32% of Americans said that it was very important to be Christian in order to be an American. People do not need to be Christian to be Americans, because being an American and being a Christian are two completely and separate things. One can be both, one can be neither, one can be one but not the other. There are two primary myths that Christian nationalists would have us believe. The first is that America was founded as a Christian nation. This is easily disproven, first, by the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence themselves, which I will be getting to in future videos. Another is James Madison's pamphlet, Memorial and Remonstrance Against Religious Assessments. He wrote this in 1785 to oppose Patrick Henry's proposal of a 3-penny tax for the support of Virginia ministers. Madison said in this pamphlet, "Even small, seemingly insignificant battles to uphold our rights must be fought on principle, otherwise the infringements become authority for future violations." This is also why I found the Madison quote so disingenuous when I looked at the Burton video. It was obvious from what Madison wrote here that he couldn't possibly have said what Burton attributed to him about the Ten Commandments. Finally is the Treaty of Tripoli, which was written by Washington, signed by Adams, with the consent of the entire U.S. Senate, which read, "The government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." The second myth that Christian nationalists would have us believe is that our nation was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. This one is a little bit more difficult and will take more depth in order to dispel. Judeo-Christian tradition, according to Newsweek magazine, is a made-in-America myth. It originated shortly after World War II, when Holocaust survivors were arriving in the United States, and the idea of the U.S. being a Christian civilization seemed too exclusive, according to Professor Mark Silk. The idea of America being a Judeo-Christian society became much more popular in the 1950s during McCarthyism, when communism and atheism were seen to go hand in hand, and thus America as a Judeo-Christian nation became much more popular. However, despite Judeo-Christians seeming to be inclusive, Christian nationalists would focus entirely on the Christian and not on the Judeo part of this equation. For example, in the War on Christmas, they want to bring nativity sets onto government property. Nativity sets are clearly Christian only and not Jewish. And the same groups have no interest in bringing Hanukkah displays to the same government properties. There is a Judeo-Christian voter guide website which contains links to various Christian sites, but not a single Jewish site. One of the primary sources that Christian nationalists use to show that our nation was founded on Christian principles is looking at the religious beliefs of the founding fathers themselves, and many of them were Christians. However, most of them were nominal Christians at best. For example, we often hear about the piety of George Washington, but more of it is myth than actual fact. Mason Locke Weems wrote a biography of George Washington in 1800, just months after his death. The book was entitled A History of the Life and Death, Virtues and Exploits of George Washington. This book started as a pamphlet, but expanded as it went into further and further editions. It was extremely well read. The myth of the cherry tree originated in this pamphlet. And when we get to the 17th edition, an edition was made that has become pervasive in U.S. history. The idea of George Washington praying for the soldiers at Valley Forge. This event is not found in any historical documents, but clearly originated within this pamphlet. But it was picked up by artists and is depicted in the Capitol Prayer Room at the George Washington Memorial Chapel at Valley Forge on postage stamps. It was even picked up by McGuffey Reader and was read by millions of school children. And that is why this particular idea became so pervasive within society, even though it began in a pamphlet written by a man who perpetuated a number of other myths as well. George Washington did attend church. However, Bishop William White, who presided at a number of the churches that Washington attended, said that he was rarely there. He attended approximately once a month prior to his presidency and annually after that. But he never took communion, and he refused any kind of religious ritual or priest at his deathbed. Washington mentions Jesus only once in 90 volumes of letters and never in any personal correspondence. Other founding fathers, such as Ben Franklin, John Adams, and James Madison, were Christians, but there is no evidence that their Christian beliefs had any effect on the founding documents of the United States. The logic that because they were Christian made us a Christian nation makes as much sense as saying that blue jeans are Jewish because Levi Strauss was Jewish, or that we are a nation of hair powderers or wig wearers. The evidence of a link between the founders' beliefs and the founding of our nation need to be stronger than just this is what they believed. The founding fathers' personal beliefs are irrelevant. They are irrelevant because they made them irrelevant, and they made them irrelevant by building a wall of separation between church and state. This is a wall that was intentionally put into our founding documents. The Constitution is deliberately godless. There are no references to the divine, to gods or goddesses, or to divine intervention. They rejected such influences in favor of the power of we the people. They made it clear in the Constitution that the power of the Constitution comes from we the people, not a god, not a creator, not any kind of divine influence. The only reference to religion in the entire Constitution comes in Article 6, Clause 3, which reads, "No religious test shall ever be required as a qualification of any office or public trust under the United States." Notice the use of superlatives. No, any, ever, shall, making it very clear that these were not mere preferences. The first act signed into law by George Washington was passed in 1789, and it was the act to regulate the time and manner of administering certain oaths. In the proposal for this act, the words "in the presence of Almighty God" and "so help me God" were proposed as wording for these oaths, and both were rejected. The adding of "so help me God" to the presidential oath was not made until much later. Alexander Hamilton said the best government posture toward religion is one of passive tolerance, not active promotion. Christian nationalists are quick to point out that the wall of separation of church and state was first written by the Supreme Court of the United States. However, this idea certainly didn't originate there. It actually originated with Thomas Jefferson, who said, "I contemplate that with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people," referring to the First Amendment, which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. Yes, he is the author of these famous words. It's not just something that the Supreme Court made up much later. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of religion and freedom of religious practice by separating church and state. By making them separate, no one religion has favor over another. Right now in the United States, the majority of people are Christian, but if that were ever to change, religious practice would not change because our government guarantees the freedom to continue to practice any religion. Madison, the author of much of the Constitution and of the Bill of Rights, said that it was not just about keeping religion out of government, but about keeping government out of religion. He urged the government not to legislate religious matters. Episcopal Bishop William Meade, who knew the Adams family well, said that it was infidel principles and not Judeo-Christian principles that influenced this founder of our Constitution. Christian nationalists would have you believe that the founders of our country had to have based their morality and our laws on Christianity because they are of the opinion that without Christianity there is no morality. However, this could not be further from the truth. Religion gets its morality from us, not the other way around. To prove this, one only need look at the issue of slavery. The God of the Bible certainly had ample opportunity to condemn slavery, and yet he never does. Instead, he regulates who can be owned as a slave, how much should be paid for a slave, how many times a slave can be beaten and how hard they can be beaten. Even Jesus said that it was okay to beat your slaves. Never do they ever condemn the practice of slavery. And yet, if you bring up slavery, Christians today will tell you that this wasn't really slavery, it was just indentured servitude. Any historian will tell you that if you go back just 200 years, there were few people who thought that owning another person was wrong, and if you go back 2,000 years ago, it was widely accepted that a person could own another person as property. An idea that we find repugnant today, and it's almost universally rejected, proving that we do not get our morality from Christianity, but rather Christianity gets its morality from us. John Adams was of the opinion that people needed religion in order to be moral, but he didn't say it would have to be the Christian religion. He said that any religion would do. Most of the Founding Fathers had an elitist attitude. They felt that they got their morality from their education and their study in that enlightened era. But because most people were not able to get an education, they felt that the masses needed religion in order to find their morality within that religion. Today, we know that most people are educated, and so we would not need morality on that basis. But there's another reason to reject the morality of religion, and that is that studies now show that the less religious, the more moral a place is. Reading directly from Seidel's book, countries with the least amount of religion have the lowest rates of violent crime and homicide. They're the best places to raise children and to be a mother. They have lower rates of corruption. They have the lowest levels of intolerance against racial and ethnic minorities. They score the highest for women's rights and gender equality. They have the greatest protection and enjoyment of political and civil liberties. They are better at educating their youth and in reading math and science. They are more peaceful, they are more prosperous, and they have a higher quality of life. This isn't just true in comparing countries. Even when we compare states within the United States, states that are more religious have the highest rates of poverty, the highest rates of obesity, the highest rates of infant mortality, the highest rates of STDs. They have the highest rates of teen pregnancy. They have the lowest percentage of college-educated adults, and they have the highest rates of murder and violent crime. Clearly, Christianity is not the source of our morality, and we do not need Christianity in order to be moral people. That's about all the time that we have for today. I would like to end with a direct quote from Mr. Seidel's book. If the Founding Fathers believed that religion was important to ensure moral behavior for the masses, but not for themselves, the educated elite, it means that the founders were moral without religion. It means that they built government using their own morality, not religion. And this eviscerates the Christian nationalist claim. Next week, we'll be looking at the Declaration of Independence and examining it for its Judeo-Christian, spoiler alert, there isn't any, basis. Until next time, live your life.